I think what we're waiting for is the next thing. Just like how when Nirvana came out, they were the thing, and that's been beaten into the ground now, and so everybody's waiting for what's next, you know.
For a band like Nirvana to come along, you need a tortured soul like Kurt Cobain was. A tortured soul who just drew you into his pain. I never got into him when they were out, you know, and now my granddaughter plays them to me, and I keep saying to her, wow, I'm so into Nirvana, and I never was. My daughter played him, and I didn't like him. My granddaughter plays him, and I love him, so I came to them late.
Well, it was, I mean, at the time, it was the early 90s, and I was, when I was going into high school, I was 14. So Nirvana was massive at the time. I think they just come out with In Utero. That was the first real style of music I really got into because it was so influential back then. And, you know, it was a different thing than today. That's another thing about today is you don't get these bands like Nirvana where everyone starts dressing like them. You know, everyone, as soon as Nirvana came out, everyone had to have like the blonde hair down to the shoulders, plaid, this whole thing. It was like a whole movement of not just like, I love this band, but I want to look like this band.
Do you think that's possible anymore with the internet and how everything's so dispersed?
I don't see it anymore. Like, do you still get like your punks and your goths and like your metal guys, and they all kind of look, you can kind of say, oh, that guy probably listens to heavy metal by the way he dresses. But you don't really get this thing of like a person looking like a band. Like, you know, like everyone looked like Kurt Cobain at my school. You know, there's a lot of people that had their hair long and wore red plaid and ripped jeans, and you know, and everyone's trying to look like Kurt Cobain, and I don't really see that anymore.
In the 90s with Nirvana, and there hasn't been anybody like that.
Do you think that there can be then that next prolific band or artist? Is it possible to happen?
I think it's really difficult to put any expectations on an artist to have the kind of career that makes people shudder to think if you can handle that kind of a career. You know, when you're a band and you're starting out, or when you're an artist starting out, you have a concept of what superstardom looks like. You have a concept of what it's like to have $100 million in the bank, or your every need is taken care of and every whim is just a phone call away, and getting the best seat at restaurants and having fans wherever you go. There's no handbook for that stuff. And it kills a lot of people in the last 50 years when success comes by your way. So I don't know. I don't know if there may ever be another turning point. I hope there is, because I think for everybody's sake, it's fun.
What are your thoughts on Kurt Cobain specifically?
I don't know. That's a tough one because of what happened. And I mean, he influenced my childhood more, and I don't necessarily really listen to Nirvana much anymore. So I don't really think about it. I just remember in the early 90s, he was big for me. And I mean, the whole band was like, you know, my first bass had to look like Chris Novoselic. So it was very, you know, I was 14, so I was very impressionable. So as a person, I mean, I think he was a brilliant songwriter. I think he was, you know, he had an insane voice. You know, when he screamed, you felt it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, he was big for me. I don't necessarily listen to it anymore, but back then it was huge.
Do you think that there could ever be that one huge singular band again?
It's tough because it's different now. Like we were talking about earlier about, you know, radio. There was a lot more radio stations back, you know, in the 90s and the early 2000s. And you had these program directors, and they all kind of, you know, like I said, like they picked the songs that go on the radio. And for whatever reason, you know, in 1991, when they chose Nirvana and Smells Like Teen Spirit, everyone chose it, so it became really big. But then you also have to have, you know, the general public agree.
How is there going to be, like I said, that wave of like a Nirvana that connects and unifies an entire globe with a single moment, a single song that changed everything, you know? Because everyone's receiving and getting their information, and the way they process and the way they listen is completely different. Every single person has a different way that they consume and process things now, right? So how do you have an overall, all-encompassing medium? I don't know. And that's why, you know, unfortunately rock bands are suffering the most out of this whole
One thing I would
you know?
be curious to know, and this would be another project for you, would be to determine how many kids in, like, Mount Carmel, for example, are passionate about playing a rock band instrument versus when we were there. Because when we were there, there was
Lots of
about
kids.
four full-fledged bands playing shows and stuff like that when we were in high school. And there must have been a smattering of other musicians that would have liked to have done that. I wonder if there's the same amount of people still doing it at the same age group, or if that has tailed off, because that's another reason why there's not enough bands or not good bands or anything like that, because maybe people aren't playing rock music anymore on their own
Picking up a
time.
guitar.
I really do believe that some new young band out there can change it, can make it a game changer, and can do it. But that's going to take a lot.
There are certain bands that are considered classic rock and legendary that probably never made a dime for the first 20 years of their existence because they were just so far in debt to the record labels that they had to go out on tour to make all of their money.
A lot of my favorite bands like Kiss, it took them 3 records before they broke. Casablanca was actually going broke, trying to break Kiss. And their 4th record, which was Kiss Alive, they weren't able to capture what they did in the studio, so that live album came out and really captured what they did. And they had a hit with Rock and Roll Night, which had been released on a previous record but didn't do anything. Same thing with Cheap Trick, I Want You to Want Me was on their 1st record. It took their 4th record live at Budokan for them playing in their natural kind of habitat, as it were, for them to break with that tune. Artist development is not what it was.
We have been together 40 years, and so is Scorpions 50 years, and so is Kiss, and so has Aerosmith. So we've been through it. We've been through hell. Our ability to be great performers was forged with the fires of the club scene and all that entailed. These kids don't have that. It's instant gratification. So the problem I have is it sets up this unrealistic expectation. And of course, the sad part about it is, for some shows like The Voice that really haven't made anybody particularly famous, is that they create these momentary stars for young kids, and they have to process this superstardom where their whole towns are, meeting them at the airports and holding up flags and banners. Hey, we welcome whatever. And then after their single drops and it bombs, they're back to anonymity again. And what happens?
I think that reality shows have killed off a lot of creativity. I do. It's sort of made being famous more important than making good music. And I'm going to leave that there. This is how I feel about it. You don't find true artists by having a talent competition. It doesn't work because you're attracting the wrong kind of talent. You're applauding mediocrity and mimicry. Can you see Kurt Cobain on a reality show? Are you kidding? He wouldn't get past the first audition.
When I was in high school, and granted we're going back a long ways, and classic rock bands like Zeppelin and all these bands we've talked about, were popular, and I wanted to, be a musician. I wanted to play guitar, and I wanted to be in a band. It was really easy for me to start a band. There were at least 4 or 5 drummers in my high school. There were 10 bass players. There were 20 guitar players, and there were 3 singers. When my daughter, who is now 21 and in college, when she was in high school and she wanted to start a band, she played guitar and she was really into the same music that I grew up with. There was 1 drummer in her high school. There was 1 bass player. There were about 5 to 10 guitar players and 600 singers. So that's what's really changed, about the world, about the music, about the industry and everything. Everybody wants to be the star. And it's not just music, it's everything. Everybody wants to be the star lawyer. Everybody wants to be the star agent. Everybody wants to be, the star garbage picker upper. I don't know. That's just what's kind of changed, and that's just with, a lot of different things, social media and a lot of things that people have access to these dreams and these ideas that they didn't have 20, 30 years ago.
When I was in grade 9, for instance, social media still wasn't that prominent yet. But by the time I had graduated, everyone was using social media by that point. And I think the issue with social media in terms of our perception of what art is that it creates this notion that popularity matters more than the actual substance of the artwork in question.
I think there hasn't been that one big band in the last 20 years thanks to the iPod. I'm 45, so when I was growing up in high school, you had the rockers over here, the metalheads over here, the stoners over here, the jocks over there, and the pretty people over there.
Everything was very, very tribal. You were a pop fan, you were a country fan, you were a rock fan. Today, though, everybody has one of these.
The iPod changed everything.
And as a result of having one of these, you can listen to anything you want, anytime you want, anywhere you happen to be.
So the structure of I am this person and I only listen to this is lost in a generation.
Which I think is really interesting from, it's nice to be ecumenical in your musical tastes, but that idea of music being used as a way to project your identity has gone away to a very large extent.
For myself, when I was younger and I moved from Cleveland to Los Angeles and to really get in the band and to be into music and make my mark, it was actually a lot easier than you would think. First of all, I had a center to go to, which was Hollywood. Things were happening in Hollywood. There were a lot of great bands coming along, great bands that were unsigned, that didn't have great bands. I mean, when some of us that were around during that time, we get together and we talk about that, it blows our minds how many bands were great that never made a record, that at that time weren't good enough, but in our minds, oh my God, this band was fantastic. We all had a common language. Music was a common language. It was really easy to talk to somebody when I was out in a club that had long black hair. Oh my God, do you like the New York Dolls? Yeah, I love the New York Dolls. And we immediately were friends. We had something in common. Nowadays, there's just so many genres and so many subgenres that, it's impossible. Do you like punk rock music? Well, yeah, I mean, that's, it's Green Day, it's this, it's the Clash. I mean, it's so many different genres within a genre. It's really hard to kind of pick people that you want to play with and work with.
When the iPod came along and you had in front of you 20 million songs of all styles, you could have on your iPod and carry it with you, unlike a Walkman where you only had to take one thing or one cassette and one album and then you had to change it. The iPod gave you the ability that it was okay to have the Beatles and Blondie and the Beach Boys and the Beastie Boys all in one giant playlist. Kids are now listening to the exact same music as their parents, and it's okay. And we would never have that. Never. Never. The Beatles fans hated the music of Frank Sinatra. If you listen to the Sex Pistols, you probably hated the classic rock that your parents grew up on. If you liked Duran Duran, you probably didn't really enjoy listening to your parents go on and on about how there's no great music anymore. But the iPod changed everything. And I think that's where it all started, as an uphill for the music industry, but also as possibly setting up that barrier for finding that next superstar. That theory works really, really well with finding a superstar every decade. In the 50s there was Elvis, and in the 60s there was the Beatles, and in the 70s there was punk and the Sex Pistols, and the 80s there was like the Michael Jacksons and the Prince and the Madonnas, and who were all kind of similar using music video. And in the 90s with Nirvana, and there hasn't been anybody like that. And I think part of going along with the iPod is we know so much about our artists now that even if the Beatles came along, we would probably get sick of them by October. We would know everything about them and not allow them to breathe. There's very few bands that can go under the spotlight for years and become successful while they're successful. We would just beat them down with the amount of media attention on them, the amount of paparazzi around them. When you think about the difference between 1964 and She Loves You with the Beatles and Abbey Road and Let It Be just 7 years later, it's astounding. The difference between, say, a Justin Bieber or Rihanna or even Adele's album of 6 years it's not that big of a stretch. It's not that big of a stretch musically, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be. Nobody's expecting or looking at those artists and say, where's your Sgt. Pepper? You know, where's your Back to the Blues basic album? And that's perfectly fine. There's nobody asking that of those artists. And maybe we should be asking it of all of those artists, you know.
Do you think that there can be then that next prolific band or artist? Is it possible to happen?
I think right now, I don't think we're going to agree as much as we are right now when it comes to everybody liking Adele, when it comes to another artist in a long, long time. Probably even an artist like Elvis. People like his early rock and roll period, and then people like his late period, the Las Vegas years. The Beatles to so many people are just like oxygen. It's like blinking. It's hard to even fathom that those songs were even written. It seems like they've come from the sky.
It's just a matter of someone realizing, a group of guys realizing that something's wrong in the world today with music, and to go out there and try to make something new that's actually old.
Led Zeppelin was Jimmy Page's brainchild. You know, here's this session player who, you know, was kicking ass and everybody was bringing him in, and he said, you know, I'm tired of doing what everybody else wants to do. I want to do what I want to do. So you need somebody that's going to, you know, have that genesis of a thought.
It's up to the people supporting that kind of music and those kind of bands that will make it happen. You know, it'll get to a point where they can't look away.
There's definitely, it's going to happen. Who it's going to be and how it's going to sound, I couldn't tell you, because I would have never guessed that Nirvana was going to be that, you know.
I'm hoping and praying that there is going to be one of those bands. Whether there is or not, that I don't know. All I can do is hope and pray that there will be.
I think we need some new great bands, you know, that are going to knock the Stones off the mantle. You know, I think there were definitely some bands throughout the years and stuff that, you know, made it to the top, got knocked out by another band and moved on and stuff like that. We just need a little bit more of that, you know. I still feel the same as I was speaking earlier, that I do have hope. I really do. I do have hope. I really do. I mean, I was around in the 80s when things were really bleak. You know, there was a lot of generic music. There was a lot of boring, bad records out, and there was no rock radio stations. There were no rock concerts. There was nothing. You know, and then bands like Guns N' Roses came along. I mean, even bands like Poison, and, you know, there were bands that came into Los Angeles that really were good bands that made a difference, and they changed the whole thing. So I want to just say that I do have hope. You know, there can be a new young band, you know, with a whole new creative outlook that can really take this in a new direction and spark a new generation to do it. But just remember, you know, back in those days, the bands that were great back then took a great singer, a great guitar player, a great bass player, and a great drummer, you know, keyboard player, whatever. It took these unique, great parts to make one sum. Nowadays, most of the bands will have like a great guitar player or a great singer or like one person, and then, you know, the other guys in the band are in 10 different bands. That's really what it's going to take. It's really going to take some, you know, some commitment, some sacrifices to really get some new young band. But I do have hope. I honestly do have hope. I really do think that can change, because I saw it happen with my own eyes years and years ago. And I do think it's possible, because I do think people are still passionate about music. And I do think music is an important part of people's lives. And therefore, how can you let a genre like classic rock die?
Hey, thanks for watching. My name is Daniel Sarkissian. I'm an independent filmmaker from Toronto.